Today, we are going to be doing a deep dive into Walmart's secondary packaging guide. But before we do that, we always like to introduce ourselves. So my name is Danielle Gloy, and I will be monitoring the chat today. And then leading today's content is Peter Spalding. So we work on the supplier wiki team and help research and write some of the content that you see or may have seen on our website. We want to create resources that are easily accessible and beneficial to you. So if you think of specific topics that you would like to see covered, or if there is certain content that you would like to see more of, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. Okay, so for today's agenda, we are going to start off by going over packaging standards and compliance at Walmart. Then we will talk about some of those key updates that have happened recently. We will do a little deep dive on what is required and not allowed. And then we will end off that section with a Q&A before Peter leads us through a supply pike for Walmart sneak peek, which is going to be great. All right, so here are a few FAQs that we typically get during webinars. So first being, will we be getting a copy of the slide deck? Yes, absolutely. You can expect to see the PDF version of the slide deck as well as the recording of this webinar appear in your email inbox in about like 3 to 4 business days. So don't worry about quickly trying to take notes or trying to get screenshots of the slides. We will make sure that we get those resources to you, like I said, in about 3 to 4 business days. And then the second question that we typically get is, what's the best way to ask a question? So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat tab, and then you'll see a Q&A tab. So the chat tab will be a great place to submit any insight or just to engage in conversation throughout the webinar. And then the Q&A tab has 2 little speech bubbles. And this is where we ask you to please submit any questions related to the content, as I will be able to monitor them and then tee them up for Peter at the end. All right. So last little thing before we get into today's content. If you are new to our webinars or have never heard of Supply Pike, we are a Northwest Arkansas-based software company who helps suppliers reduce revenue loss by detecting compliance issues and fighting them through business logic and automation. We do this in a lot of different ways and with multiple different retailers like Walmart, Target, Amazon, Kroger, and we've recently just added Home Depot to our list. So that is really exciting. And just a little shout out, we work with a lot of great suppliers. We have some of them up here today. And if your logo is not up here, we would love to see it at some point. Our goal is to help you get paid and get better. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Peter.
Thank you for that great introduction, Danielle. I think what I really like about what you said about Supplier Wiki, about what we're doing, is making things accessible and visible to people. And that's what this webinar is really all about. It's one of the reasons why we do it pretty regularly, is that the packaging standards and compliance guide is available to everyone through retailing. So everyone has access to it, but it's such an inaccessible document. So I've had to spend a lot of time in there myself, poking around, reading up on little details, as Danielle has too now. And so we want to be able to use that to just facilitate conversation about, what are some of the kind of highlights of it? What are some of its most important functions? And then what are some details that we can pluck out to really focus on to say, how does this document change from year to year? What are some important updates? But also just how can this document become a tool for suppliers generally in a variety of different kind of positions. So that's all that. Also, if you can't tell, I had a coughing fit already. I am recovering from a cold, so if my voice goes out at some point, just bear with it. We'll be able to edit it out of the final version. So whenever you get the YouTube link or whatever, hopefully it won't be in there. But yeah, all of this basically is to just say this document, the secondary packaging standards, is there. It's available. It's not super visible. It's not super accessible. So what we're doing today is we're kind of breaking it down and trying to just make it a little bit more practical and real for you guys. This webinar is not meant to be a replacement for this text in any way. What we're doing is we're really just kind of unpacking it. together. So, and it's a helpful disclaimer for really all of our webinars. Something I've been thinking a lot about lately is sometimes people will confuse us or conflate us with Walmart, confuse what we're doing with Walmart as well. We're not in any way affiliated or associated with Walmart. All that we're really trying to do is to ungate some of the really difficult and sometimes unhelpful documentation within Retail Link, to make it accessible to everyone, just on the internet through these search engines, but also to create a space where everyone can talk about it and learn from each other together, which is something that Walmart suppliers are pretty good at doing, actually. Creating an environment where there can be camaraderie and people can learn from it. So it's one of my favorite things about what we do. So really, we'll be looking at the secondary packaging standards document, but what we're really looking at is 1/3 of that whole section. So the first section is the RRP standards. It's the bottom right one in that graphic, the blue section, and that's retail ready packaging, shipping, basically. How can you ship pallets to the stores themselves or to DCs for distribution to a variety of stores, where basically it's like this thing is shrink wrapped and they're just going to unwrap it and it's going to be there in a store. So that's a lot of like seasonal stuff, or like a new kind of product release kind of special thing. Right now, what is it? It would be like St. Patty's Day stuff that might all be on one retail ready packaging display. But we'll cover that in a little bit more detail in the next slides. That's 1/3 of this document is just kind of exploring that stuff. The other third is the graphic standards, which we also won't really be covering in any detail today. But that's, what are the colors that you need on your displays and stuff like that? What are the branded colors, the on-brand branding that you're doing for your own company? How all of that is working. Is that compliant with Walmart's standards? And then the one that we'll be covering in detail today is the supply chain standards, right? That's where the real kind of the rubber meets the road, literally and figuratively, and it's where a lot of the revenue loss happens. So that's where companies are really losing a lot of their money in terms of like overages, ASN not downloaded charges, and all of that. So that's the thing that people tend to want to kind of focus on. But we'll do like surface level analysis of some of the others here. So just a little bit more. RRP will be used interchangeably with SRP and PDQ. And basically those are all just kind of, it's all meant to be the same thing. Those are the pallets that you're shipping to Walmart stores for display. And that's on pages 22 through 93 of the most recent SPS. So that one was released in April, I believe, of last year, 2023. And that page number isn't necessarily the number of the pages on the PDF. That's the number that you see in the top right corner. So that's a really important caveat for this whole conversation. We have some Marina in the chat saying August is the one that I have. So maybe I'm confusing April and August, or there was a newer update that might have changed some of these page numbers. So take that with a grain of salt. Thanks, Marina, for that shout out. It might be just August is whenever they release their annual updates, and I just confused it with April. I'm trying to think when we did this webinar for the first time. I think it was after that August update. I think that kind of triggered this. But yes, so take all this with a grain of salt. If anyone wants to just kind of double check these page numbers with the August version, that would be helpful too. But the page numbers will be okay. Great, thank you, Marina. So helpful. So these page numbers are up to date, but they will probably be obsolete in a number of months whenever the new annual version of this document comes out. So it's really important to remember all that too. We'll be covering at the end of this what the updates were to the latest version. That is the August 2023 version. So, and then what we can kind of infer from that since then, what those changes are. But yeah, so this is 22 through 93 of the SPS is that specific kind of packaging. And then the graphic standards, again, that's the colors, strategic display stuff. That's 94 through 175 with SPS. So these are taking up a pretty significant chunk of the book itself, and they are important to a lot of people. A lot of people's whole just jobs are kind of revolve around 1 or 2 pages of those sections. But again, when you're looking at the revenue loss on a large scale from a bird's eye view, from like a CFO at a CPG level, the real pain points are going to be in the supply chain standards. That's where a lot of the money is actually going to be lost. With the RRP standards and with graphic standards, it's a little bit more of a like one-time fix. You can figure out what it is, you can get into the rhythm, and unless there are like macro scale changes that are coming out with a new annual edition, which we haven't seen in a long time, then they don't need to be focused on as much, in my opinion. Now, for some people's jobs, yeah, they really do. So, but we're just looking at a macro level for the supply chain stuff itself. So the supply chain standards is pages 176 through 380 of the document. And that's going to cover everything from basically your warehouse, your packaging, your barcodes to whenever it's actually received, whenever Walmart actually has it, whether that's at a DC or in a store, depending on what kind of shipping you're doing. So real quick, we'll go into a little bit more detail about these other sections before moving on again. But there's basically kind of 5 PDQ or RRP or SRP rules, and these are good to review. Just if your company does any of this, it's good to just kind of have this awareness of the philosophy of Walmart, on top of mind. But this is their 5 kind of like rules or philosophies of the PDQ. Deliver the message, having structural integrity, clear price impression, manage inventory turnover, obviously, and then maintain a clear line of sight. So some of these are like the inventory turnover is just going to be relevant for every single kind of shipment that you do to Walmart, every single sale. Obviously, that's half the battle, is just making sure that you're aware of how much is actually being moved and how much isn't. We've got a lot of Illuminate stuff coming out these days, and Illuminate is kind of helpful for reporting is basically how you track all of that. So that's all that I can think about. I've been in the Illuminate world for so long. So yeah, stay tuned for some Illuminate content. We're going to do Illuminate recipes webinar in May, I think. So if you want to learn more about what is charter, is that something that's a good business idea for us or not, we'll cover a little bit of that. But we'll spend most of the time talking about how to pull reports in Illuminate and how it's a little different from DSS. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, turnover is relevant to anything. It's especially relevant to PDQ displays. But things like maintaining a clear line of sight, that's really important for PDQ, right? That's really important for the shelf-ready packaging displays. So it's an interesting read. It's a good read, that pages 27 through 28 of that for that particular reason. And then the graphic standards, these are it's kind of broken down into a few different sections. You have the show the value, which is more of a like, yeah, what's the philosophy behind the graphic standards? And then you have seasonal events by category. So how are these things changing? How are these regulations changing seasonally? And then private brands and the appendices, which is required reading in this document. I would say we'll cover some in detail some stuff from some appendices later on. So stay tuned for that. Appendices, I always skip them. I'm a big fan of fiction. I love to read, but I'll always skip an appendix at the end of a book if I can. But in the supply chain standards, it's required reading, unfortunately. And some of it is very dry. So this is our kind of like language. So I've been referring to it as the SPS. SPS is the whole document at the top. This is just to kind of make sure that we're all kind of talking about the same thing. SPS is the whole big document. The SPS CS23 is the one that Marina was talking about in the chat. That is the August update. And it's particularly talking about the supply chain standards portion. So from here on out, that's the document that we're looking at. It's basically everything after page 170 up to page roughly 400. And then there's some major subsets here that we'll be diving into a little bit. The supply chain standards, right? So that's the big bulk. But general merch is huge. So we'll talk about that a lot. And then we'll spend time in the appendices because that's where the changes are logged from year to year. So it goes back to like 2020, I think, is the first time they had this format for the supply chain standards. And they talk about the changes, or 2019 maybe. So they talk about the changes they made in 2020, the changes they made in 2021, 22, 23 now. And so we'll be going over the 23 changes. And then there's a really helpful glossary and an FAQ section that I would describe as less than really helpful. Yes, so those are kind of the main chunks of it. Question for the chat that you can kind of put in there, and I'll keep an eye on it, but Danielle will too if something kind of comes up later. What is the SQEP fine that you receive the most, right? And so this is something we've done a little bit of research on. So we see, ASN not downloaded overages. Those are two pretty common ones, right? In the SQEP dashboard, what is the thing that you guys are kind of being hit with, if you feel comfortable sharing that, of course, right? Because it changes a lot from category to category, from individual company to company. There's a lot of changes. So an important thing to do is to kind of benchmark that against the mainstream. So I think it's just called Common SQEP Defects is an ebook that I wrote, I think last year. And that will be helpful for doing some benchmarking work of your own. We see one, Crystal has mentioned palette quality. Thanks, Danielle, for posting the common SQEP defects in there. That could be helpful for benchmarking. You can see how common are the ones that we're getting hit with the most. So palette quality is one that Crystal shouted out there, which is another common one. But what we see really is in SQEP is these are broken down by phase, sort of, or at least they were released in phases. There is a fourth phase allegedly coming. Haven't heard anything about it yet. Okay, Caroline has given a shout for barcode. Barcode is huge. Missing barcode or barcode label, wrong barcode are often the case. And the titles of these defects aren't always very helpful too. So yeah, thanks for that. We'll be getting into fix it a little bit here too. Also, we got a lot of SQEP content. So if it's something that you're really wanting to learn a lot more about, Danielle can share some of that in the chat too. But we like to think of it in terms of the phases because it is it's very helpful kind of discrete categories for understanding what SQEP is all about. Palette damages, Caroline said. Yeah, that's really helpful too. Is it you're always trying to figure out, is this a problem with us or is it a problem with Walmart? Is it a problem with the 3PL or where's it actually kind of happening? And but the way that Walmart breaks it down is by PO accuracy phase 1. So that's more of an electronic thing. And then phases 2 and 3 are more physical shipping related, barcode and labeling. And again, we see those all the time. And then packaging, pallet, and load compliance. So you can think of it as kind of like they get more about the actual physical shipment itself the farther along they go. The first one is entirely just EDI, basically. It's electronic accuracy. Can you actually deliver what Walmart is demanding and on time? And then phase 2 is about the outside of the shipments. What are you accurately communicating what's in there? Is it in the place that Walmart needs it to be for automated receiving, stuff like that? And then the third one is about the structural integrity of the shipment itself. Okay, Caroline has also said sometimes there are problems with carriers, but road conditions can cause shifting too. So it's yeah, there's uh, it's very hard to sometimes it can be very hard to pinpoint the actual thing itself. How do we avoid that? Can we do these shipments in different ways through freight or like light rail or something, or does it have to be trucking as it almost always does? So those are important questions to ask too. But thanks for sharing, guys. It's really I love to hear from suppliers themselves what they're really kind of dealing with because my work is um, so it feels like it's so disconnected from the actual boots on the ground experience of people. So that's really helpful to me. And then this is a little bit more of a detailed kind of timeline for these releases. Some of you might be aware of this already, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But yeah, we haven't had anything since Q1 of year end 23. So that was in 2022, kind of at the beginning of 2022 was the latest phase that was released. They were all released kind of back to back. And now it's just quiet and we haven't heard anything about phase 4. So I think there was a mention in one of the supplier growth forums, something about Squet, but we never got it last year. And so yeah, who knows? All right. So this is a little bit of benchmarking data that you could use too. Again, don't worry about screenshotting this. You'll get a copy of this too. But this is from a really wide kind of a population sample size of suppliers. But yeah, you can see that really case compliance is the killer. At least it was through July of 2022. But there's a lot of PO accuracy finds in there too. So could be helpful. Here's a little bit more benchmarking data, just the same thing, but in accounting in numbers themselves from our sample size. Total of $17 million is the sample size. So not enormous, but over a wide variety of suppliers in terms of size, in terms of so there were some enterprise suppliers, some smaller suppliers, and then basically over all of the categories. So it should be a pretty good snapshot of your average supplier experience. But I would look at the defect subtype. Whenever you say the top 5 SQEP finds, that's broken down by the subtype. So ASN not downloaded, overage, incorrect barcode, incorrect quantity for barcode, and then incorrect quantity for label as well. Those are the big 5 that we've seen. And then there's a pretty significant drop off from there. But again, if you're curious about that, go back in the chat a little bit to the common SQEP defects. There's a big benchmarking section there that will go into more detail about that. Okay. So I'm going to skip this slide for now. There's nothing really essential on here that we haven't covered already. But basically what I want to say is that we're looking for the narrative. What is the narrative that Walmart is really trying to communicate in these updates to the supply chain standards, right? Because supply chain is evolving and changing all of the time. And so we can kind of draw out some through lines, some narratives. What is it that Walmart is really trying to communicate that it wants from its suppliers in years to come? Very clearly, there's a message coming through. So stay tuned for that. But now we'll dive a little bit, and I'm gonna gloss over this because we have this in pretty gratuitous detail elsewhere. So I don't want to go into it too deep. But basically, this is the big 5. ASN not downloaded. This belongs to phase 1, right? Yeah, obviously ASN's EDI related stuff. But what we see with this one, the big takeaway with this one, if you're seeing a lot of this, is that it probably is not an EDI issue. It's probably a timing issue about when you're sending the ASN. If it's being received too far in advance, right? Walmart will get very picky about that. But especially if the shipment is received first and then the ASN is received, which we see happening a lot, then you'll get an ASN not downloaded. You could get a shortage fine. You could get all kinds of things whenever that happens. So um, everything can go wrong if the advanced ship notice is not sent in advance of the shipment. We say sending around the time of shipping is the best way to avoid this. But yeah, of course, it's going to be hard to avoid just generally. I don't like this slide because overages are really complicated and this makes it look simple. Um, yeah, we like to think of overages in two major categories, I would say. There's billable overages and then there's overage fines. This slide is just talking about overage fines, right? So this is when Walmart is invoicing a supplier for having overshipped on a particular shipment. And this is just the fine. This is just talking about the fine that you receive as a result of that. Billable overages are different, basically, because in that context, it's an overage. You might be receiving a fine for it, but it's the stuff that Walmart receives and is not sending back and is not paying for, right? Walmart is like, well, we only ordered 80 and you sent 100, which might not be true. They could be wrong. They could be wrong about how much they actually ordered whenever they're giving an overage. Um, and then what they're saying is, well, we're only going to pay for 80 because that's what we ordered, and then we're going to hit you with a fine on top of that too, right? But that extra 20 can be thought of as billable. And what we mean by that is you can actually bill Walmart for the extra 20 and Walmart will pay it back sometimes. Walmart is cranky about it, right? Because they don't have the distribution center space for that. They don't have the warehouse space for it. And so they'll hit you with a fine for it and they won't pay for it initially, but oftentimes they will if you bill for them later on. So that's anyways, but all of that, I'm going to kind of gloss over this. This is kind of talking about both kinds of overages, but it's more helpful to think of overages in terms of those two different things. Whereas when we're talking about SQEP, we're mostly talking about overage fines. So that's that. And then incorrect barcode. Yeah, read about this kind of in your own time. We talk about OLIF and we talk about item 360, but oftentimes this is something of a misnomer as well, right? It's not that your company just put the wrong barcode on the right shipment. It's that there's a miscommunication about what is supposed to be received. And Walmart will be expecting one kind of barcode and will actually get a different one. So, but yeah, again, read about this kind of later or in some of our other SQEP content. The common SQEP defects is all of this is handled in a lot of detail. Same thing for incorrect quantity, right? It's unlikely that you're shipping 50 cases of something and the barcode says 55. What's more likely is that the barcode is right in terms of the quantity, but Walmart and the supplier are confused about what that quantity is supposed to be. And again, whose fault is that? Well, it can change from kind of scenario to scenario. Same thing for the incorrect quantity for labels, obviously too. But if you have more questions about the frequency of those, you want to see more kind of deep dives into that, got a ton of SQEP content that's really great out there. So if you go to supplierwiki.supplypike.com, or if you haven't subscribed for our newsletter yet, either highly recommend doing that too, just to kind of be aware of what's on the horizon for us. But this is the stuff that I think is really good for today to cover in a little bit more detail. I've mentioned the appendices a little bit already. But here we have the page numbers from the 2023 version, which is the latest version, about the updates, how you can find the actual updates as they happen. And again, to me, this is gold because this is communicating Walmart's vision, right? What Walmart's vision has been over the last couple of years, and then where it's actually headed. I think that we can actually see that here. And what's different about this compared to something like the Supplier Growth Forum is that there isn't the corporate BS, right? For lack of a better way of describing it. This is the real changes that are happening to the actual process itself. It's not about what Walmart is saying they want to do, right? It's not about what a company is kind of like telling everyone is what it's doing. This is the changes that are actually happening. So they're good for really getting to the heart of the issue. What is Walmart's vision for the future? So there you can see the last couple of years, what those changes have been in 2020, 21, and 22. And those are all documented in Appendix E. So those are good to just look over, I would say. You know, you don't need to get too paranoid about it, like I do whenever I'm trying to figure out what Walmart's doing. But it can be very helpful. It can be very helpful for yeah, just getting that vision of what's going on there. So Betsy in the chat said, "Can you share a link for the SPSCS?" I think that Danielle could probably do that while we're going through. They used to have this online. I think someone had just uploaded a PDF of it. Thank you, Danielle. That's perfect. Someone had just uploaded a PDF on the internet. I think it got taken down, but it used to be more accessible. Now, this is a corporate Walmart link, so it's not gated by Retail Link, but sometimes if you go to Retail Link, you can find it there too. So yeah, thank you, Danielle, for that. And that could be really helpful to just follow along for the rest of this webinar too, because a lot of these are page numbers that are just very specific. So these are the previous updates. These are some of the 2022 updates that I wanted to show here. A lot of these are very specific to a very particular category or a very particular kind of supplier. Some of these are changes that are helpful, applicable to everyone. We see some of the PDQ display changes that are going on there. But then, yeah, so some of this is meat, poultry, seafood labeling. So that changes. And so again, super important for some people and super not important for others. And Walmart may do a better job of reaching out to you specifically about changes that are coming that are relevant to your category or to your brand or whatever that is. But again, as we've seen with Walmart, that's not always the case. Sometimes you got to go really above and beyond to try to figure out what's going on there, right? So again, your relationship with your buyer could be really great. Your buyer could be doing their homework and trying to stay on top of these things as well. But yeah, it changes from situation to situation. So knowing where to find this can be pretty helpful too. And you'll also notice there's a required thing there at the end of some of them, and that's in bold font and red. And then we see some that say not allowed too. And we'll talk about those. I don't know what it means, but we'll talk about it. You're like, my thought is like, isn't all of this required? So I think it's communicating something about what those changes are, different to the others. But yeah, we'll dig into that a little bit more too. So the most recent updates, and this will be helpful if you've got it pulled up on your own as well. Notable 2023 updates for the SPSCS 23 is in a few different spots. So there's one call out that I wanted to make a pretty great graphic on automation eligibility for case specifications on pages 203 to 206. I think we've got a picture of this somewhere. Maybe I'm thinking of a different one. But it's a good graphic. It's good to read. Again, it'll communicate the philosophy of automation for the future, right? Obviously, that's where everything's going. A spoiler alert, that's the narrative, right? That's what Walmart is really trying to communicate. So that's what is trying to be communicated in that particular graphic. Automation eligibility, how to kind of get more on board with that. And then the barcode compliance updates, that's going to be, I think that those page numbers are just the whole barcode section. So The changes that have been made to barcode compliance over the years affect every one of these sections. As you'll be able to see here, I think that if I haven't highlighted it here, I'll highlight it on a different page. But look at all of those GTINs and ITF 14s, GS 1s. Those are all the barcode changes. And again, I think that the reason is just because it is automation, right? I think that's basically the kind of the philosophy. That's the main message of what's going on here. Crystal has just made a shout out about a newer version that was released on January 31st, 2024. So we will definitely be looking that over and updating this slide deck and adding a section to that too. If there is a 2024 updates section in the Appendix E to that, again, I don't want to, I feel like I'm asking you guys to do a lot of work as we do this, but if you see a 2024 updates in the Appendix E section, that would be confirmation. Okay, great. All right, page 177 is the 2024 update. So that's really exciting. We'll get a more updated version of this webinar out pretty soon too, for that as well. Thank you so much, Crystal, as always, for your help with that. So that's really important. Everyone go check those out as well. She's put a Supplier Academy, a retail link in the chat for everyone to go see that one as well. Follow up on those updates too, because those will again give us more of that insight into the narrative, and obviously be super helpful on a logistics scale, right? So there's all that. The main shout out I wanted to make on this particular slide is just look at all those barcode changes, right? That's the way that things are changing. All of these DCs, Walmart wants not a single person in them, or wants one full-time employee in every single DC and everything else to be just completely automated. Understandably, right? To create more efficiency. So that's that. So yeah, mentioned the receiving process a lot. In this 2022 updates, the same section's update was titled Clarify Items Affecting the Ability to Scan Barcodes. So again, that's the main message, right? So it went from the ability to scan barcodes to automation eligibility. That's the language that's kind of being used around there. And here's the 2023 version. Clarify automation eligible / ineligible case specifications. It's a little bit wordier, right? But what they want is to just be able to put it on the track and forget about it for it to be perfect, right? This is the graphic I was talking about before on pages, I think 203 to 206. And it's not very detailed, but it is helpful for again, giving that higher level view of what Walmart is really looking for when they're talking about automation eligibility. So you can go back over these later on and obviously look at them in the updated version of the document itself too. So that can be really helpful there. Here's just a call out for the all of the mentions of the barcode changes that happened in 2023. And let us know if any of you have the 2024 up, if you're seeing a similar sort of thing. Are there a lot of barcode changes that are in that section as well? Or if it's something else that you're seeing too. Again, I'm giving you homework, in-class assignments, but yeah. So one thing I want to talk about too, and maybe there's more clarification of this in 2024 as well, but I just want to call out these basically because I don't know what they are. I don't know what it's really trying to communicate. But it is drawing our attention to very particular changes. So maybe these are more universal changes that are relevant to everyone. Maybe what it's really trying to communicate, I think this is the next slide. Maybe what it's really trying to communicate is that required changes are new requirements, additional things that need to be done. And not allows are things that used to be allowed or that there wasn't clarification about that there now is a um, rule about. Excuse me. I'm losing it. I gotta make it just 15 more minutes. Okay, so I've been broken record about this already. We don't need to go into it in too much more detail. The point of emphasis in 2023 is automation. So now what we'll be looking for is that the same narrative that has carried over from into 2024 as well? Do we still see that level of intensity to the changes that are being made there? But I don't think we have any questions. We have a ton of interaction. Danielle, is there anything that you wanted to shout out?
Yep, I don't see any questions that have come through. Thank you so much for going through that content, and just thank you so much for all of the engagement in the chat. We really enjoy the perspective and just the insights. If you go to the next page, we have already spoken about quite a few of the resources that we have, like the common SQEP defects, but we have a whole bunch more, especially related around SQEP. I'm going to send through a couple more of those in the chat. We have more webinars. There's another ebook, a SQEP handbook that just covers the different phases a lot more in detail. And then we have extra webinars. And if you want to just stay up to date with all of this stuff, we're going to be updating the slide decks and stuff. You can go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter. It has also recently gotten a little bit of a revamp, and so it's very entertaining to say the least, and it's really fun, and I think it will be a great fit. So I'm going to go ahead and send through those resources. And then if you guys think of a question later on, or if you would like to share anything, please feel free to reach out to us. Our emails are up on the screen, and we would just love to hear from you and continue that conversation with you. Okay, so if this is where you have to leave us, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate you being here with us today. I am now going to hand it off back to Peter just to give us just a sneak peek of our product for Walmart, and he'll go ahead and begin that.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, the engagement has been so great today. We really appreciate that. I think that I wanted to do a little bit of a shout out for the Ken Letry talk that he gave a little while ago. He's been a regular of our webinars for a long time. He's someone that we love to have in the chat too. But he had a lot of really great insights, especially around Fix It, which I said we were going to talk about today, and we really didn't. So I'd like to shout out that one. If you get the slide deck in a couple of days, there will be a link there, clickable link there. But yeah, so we're going to pivot a little bit to talking about SupplyPike. If you're a current customer, obviously, this probably won't be too insightful for you. You probably know more about how to use the app than I do. But if you haven't heard of SupplyPike before and you're curious about what it is, what our SQEP solution is, how our SQEP product could help your SQEP performance, stuff like that, stick around for that. I'll just kind of be explaining it at a very high level, very elementary view of what our product is. So I'm going to start here in the deduction space, and it's different from compliance, but this is how we got our start. And it was connected intimately with shipping as well. So shipping document integration is one of our kind of proudest features. We're very proud of our product's ability to kind of look at the performance across all of these different programs, compliance programs, or AP deductions, and to be able to give people a lot of insight into how their performance is doing. So that's what this first page is. Really, it's just high level insight. How much of the things that you've disputed is Walmart looking at right now? That's our Walmart research tab right there. How much have you paid? Or how much has been paid back to you? How much are you awaiting repayment? And then what is your dispute win rate, right? And what we're looking at here, this is demo data. So this isn't a real company. This is a really ideal number. This is where we like everyone to get with Supply Pike after maybe a couple of years, to be in that kind of category that you're going to win back all of the money that has been lost to invalid deductions. But to get into that a little bit on a little bit more granular level, I like to go into an individual claim and to look at how do we do this? Okay, so how do we know whether disputes are valid or not? Well, it's something that you can do automatically with Supply Pike, because again, we have our shipping document integration. So we'll be able to see, okay, here's the purchase order, here's the invoice, the original invoice, and we'll be able to take all of the data in these huge unwieldy documents and really boil it down to like, okay, was this shipment actually $346 short or was it not? So we can really check all of Walmart's work, right? A lot of suppliers will just write off shortages as a loss, right? Assuming that it's either all valid or just assuming that they don't have the time or the resources to go through and check all of Walmart's work, right? But that's a super important part of the process for any supplier to be able to stay in Walmart, to be able to stay competitive in Walmart, is to be able to kind of keep track of all those things too. So here again, this is all fake stuff, so it's not like I'd be revealing someone's information if I click into these. But what you can do is you can view, you can download the particular purchase order that's connected with this deduction of $346. You can look at the invoice, and if it was valid, then this would be checked and it would be there too, right? So we can see Walmart's documentation as well by integrating with the retail link. And then we're looking at the BOL, right? So in this case, what this means is that Walmart is saying that they don't have it, but here's the proof that they did have it. So this is $346 that you can dispute and get back right away. So you can just click it and it'll go through automatically. One thing I'd like to shout out is it's in a beta stage right now, but it's really great. People have been loving it. It's something I'm really kind of passionate about as an educator on this side of things, is our root cause feature. This is so great because it really helps people. It really puts into clear language what's going on with each of these shortage deductions. And we're releasing a root cause feature for allowance deductions as well, coming up here pretty soon, which I'm stoked about because allowances are so confusing. But yeah, in this case, it's a likely invalid deduction because the shipped quantity matches invoice quantity on deducted items. So this is very helpful language for if you have to explain something like this to your boss or to a CFO, it'll give you a lot of that helpful language for kind of simplifying it there too. Another thing that I want to shout out about our product it actually blew my mind the first time that I saw it is auto disputing. So we used to really kind of market the one-click disputing, how proud we were of that. Excuse me. This I wanted to shout out as well as our auto disputing feature. So what you can do is you can say, any of the fines that we get that Supply Pike can automatically tell us these are invalid, right? There's a very high likelihood that these are invalid. You can select those, right? So for auto disputing, and what you say is, hey, any code 22, any shortage, or 23 that Supply Pike has determined is invalid, just go ahead and dispute it right away. And then you don't need to worry about having to do say, is the juice worth the squeeze for a small fine versus a big fine, right? Go after the big fines first and then the small ones. You can go after all the ones that are invalid, and then the ones that are likely invalid, you can go after on your own if you want. If you have the time, if you have the work hours in your schedule to do it that way, you could do it that way too. Or you say, hey, all criteria, I don't care, dispute it all. We'll let Walmart kind of figure it out. That will actually save you a ton of time just doing it that way. And then you can see the supplier feedback phase whenever they come back through again. If you guys have any questions about the product itself, we don't do product marketing for it. But you can go to my email as well from the previous slide and send me a question there too, and I can get you connected to the right people as well. But that's all that we really have for today. Sorry we couldn't do the SQEP product preview there either. But yeah, hopefully that was a little bit helpful for all that too. I don't think that we have any questions about the product itself or about anything else that we were covering from before. So with that, we will see you next time.